Yes, sir. So, ladies and gentlemen, very good evening to all of you. It's a great honor and privilege for me to continue this series of Inspire webinars. And today we have again a very, very inspiring leader with us, Mr. Kuldeep Jain, Managing Director and Founder at CleanMax Energy. Very good evening, Kuldeep ji. Welcome you to our webinar.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we all know, Kuldeep ji has been a trendsetter or a leader in a very different perspective that. As I remember, when I started my solar journey, I always used to think that the future only lies in rooftops. But in India, the case has been different. Utility scale business has been much more bigger and wider, and rooftops has been struggling. And we always have been thinking how rooftops will grow. And we're very fortunate to have leaders like Kuldeep sir, who has come and who has created business models that has led to the distributed solar industry and the rooftop industry to grow this far as well. Though I am sure there are challenges, and still I think we have just reached around 4 to 5 gigawatts of distributed solar or rooftop solar assets only, and there is a mammoth target in front of us. A brief introduction about Kuldeep sir, though he doesn't need an introduction. Sir is an alumnus of IIM Ahmedabad, one of the greatest education institutes in this country. A dream for a lot of people to get their education from. After that, he has worked with McKinsey as the energy head. McKinsey, again, is a very, very big dream to achieve at any level. Sir has been at the top level in the energy practice. So, Kuldeep sir, in the beginning, we would all love to know about your learnings and experiences. First, definitely from IIM Ahmedabad. How was the experience in the culture there? What was the insights that you learned from your education times? And then what was your the brief things that you remember during your research or working years at McKinsey? And then how did you basically, how did it occur to you to start a venture such as CleanMax? Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Anand. I think your first question encapsulates 5 different questions within it. So very efficient questioning. But yeah, by education, I was from the commerce field, so I did my CA and ICWA, inspired by my father, who's also a chartered accountant. I finished my CA by the time I was 22. and realized that I probably, don't quite enjoy accounts and audit. So I wanted to, do something more. I never thought I would get into a institute like IIM Ahmedabad. I always thought that is that is the privilege of maybe some very smart people from IIT and not of chartered accountants. But I was lucky that IIM Ahmedabad probably had some sort of diversity quota. They wanted some people who were maybe less intelligent but not engineers. So while IIM Calcutta had, I think, 98 or 99% engineers, IIM Ahmedabad always kept a 70% engineers, 30% from other fields, kind of thing. Anyway, so I got into IIM Ahmedabad. The thing which struck me most about IIM Ahmedabad was a culture of competitiveness and excellence, right? And I'd like to stress both. Yes, it was competitive because you had suddenly 200 very, very bright kids who came together, right? And almost everyone you met was some sort of topper. Someone was a topper from Presidency College, someone was a topper from IT Bombay's mechanical engineering, that kind of thing always was there. So it was very, very incredibly intense kind of place. So it was competitive, and everyone wanted to do well. It made a difference to the kind of shortlists you got in job interviews later. Your rank was correlated to the kind of shortlists you got, and therefore the kind of jobs you had an opportunity at. And therefore people were intensely competitive. There was also a great culture of excellence in everyone and everything there, which the institute drilled into you. Right? We all started out as maybe as kids at one level. The average age then was 22 or 23. In group discussions then, lots of basic ideas would be thrown around without much thought. But the professors always drilled a culture of excellence, of thinking more, doing things well into you. And I think that really played a key role. I was both quite lucky and privileged. I was within the top 10 ranks in my in IIM Ahmedabad. And I got a job at McKinsey and Company, which is the famous consulting firm. And therein began another chapter. If IIM Ahmedabad had valued excellence, I think McKinsey compounded it and was just much more international. And I was there for 12 years. People often joke that a year in McKinsey is like 6 or 7 years at another place. So I felt like an old man when I left McKinsey. I was heading McKinsey. I became a global partner in 2009. But to be honest, as soon as I became a global partner, right, which was a mission to be achieved, a mountain to be climbed. And it's a big deal because all over the world, out of 7 people who join McKinsey, 1 person on average becomes a global level partner. So the ratio is 1 out of 7, right? So it was always a big deal in McKinsey. So I wanted to not leave before having hit that landmark. But after having hit that landmark, I did feel that it's now or never. I became a global partner at the age of 34. So I did feel that if I don't leave now, I get older and older, then I will never become an entrepreneur. So I announced my departure very soon after becoming a partner. And yes, at the time of at that time I was heading energy consulting for McKinsey, but I did many other things as well. And it was great fun because I also had an opportunity to live and work in cities like London and Zurich and Singapore. in addition to Mumbai and Hyderabad, right? So I got a diverse experience, and for a middle class boy from Thane, it was a great experience. And I always maintain that my best friends to date are those I made at IIM Ahmedabad and at McKinsey. So, it holds a very special place in my heart. In fact, with respect to IIM Ahmedabad, recently we announced the formation of an endowment fund with a initial corpus of 100 crores, out of which I'm contributing around 10 crores. And, I'm also on the board of directors of that endowment fund for IIM Ahmedabad. So that was anyway in terms of educational background and McKinsey.
Yeah. So ladies and gentlemen, this Inspire series has been so amazing. Whichever leader you talk to sounds so humble and so down to earth. Sir has very differently put himself at, saying that, okay, there were more intelligent people than him. But I am sure we all understand excelling at an institute or getting in an institute like IIM Ahmedabad in itself, and then getting into McKinsey and then topping it. So definitely, sir, it's quite heart touching and a very, very important trait to learn about being humble and down to earth. And we totally understand this is how you feel so light and so energetic, and you always think of or dream of new mountains to climb. And definitely, I totally second that. Working 1 year at McKinsey would be like 5 years for you, but for a lot of people, it would be like 50 years. So I'm sure you have lots of work to do. What one thing that definitely interests me or kind of makes me curious is you are a person who have really who really have a great understanding about the energy markets, because McKinsey being a top class firm, you being the top notch person at McKinsey in those times. So the concepts or the basics or the fundamentals about the energy markets or what's going to happen in future in energy markets, what you understand is of immense is going to be an immense knowledge for all of us. If you could listen a little more about your perspectives of the energy market, which is going to evolve in times to come.
Well, okay, let me try to come to a few insights. So renewables to this century will be what oil was last, right? Renewables to this century, the next 100 years, of which 20 have passed, will be what oil was to the last, right? And therefore, it's interesting if you see, possibly due to COVID, but I think there are many different factors at play. The reality is that in oil, whether all the large oil producers, whether it's the countries in question, such as Saudi Arabia or others, or it's the very large companies such as ExxonMobil or Shell, they need a average price of around $70 per barrel to make their budgets balance. Okay, I'm not saying that's the cost of extraction of oil, right? But extracting the oil is not the only cost a country or a city or a government incurs, right? But to balance the books, they need $70 to $80 of oil price. Now, there are two contrasting realities there. One is that it's increasingly becoming tougher and tougher for them to attain that kind of an oil price, because of the fact that the USA now, due to shale gas as well as shale oil, is no longer a net importer in a big way of the oil market. So one huge consumer has gone. There are other consumption side threats to oil and gas, particularly around the shift to more renewables on the power usage of oil, as well as the shift over time to electric vehicles on the automotive usage of oil. So, people are, in the oil world are really worried. And in reality, the way decline of any industry comes is it's sort of, you have a very gradual slope for a while and then you sort of fall off the cliff, right? That's how it happens in most industries. You have some decline, and then really change becomes so fast that there are not that many consumers left. And you don't need oil to stop being consumed. You need 20-30% reduction in the demand for oil for the prices to collapse and all the big players to be in serious trouble. Right? So that's the reality. So things are not looking great for oil and gas, right, as a industry.
I think that's
And so that's one part of the energy markets, right? The other part of the energy markets is power, which is relatively much more stable. In fact, when we were studying finance, say when I was doing my MBA in 1999, 20 years ago, there was a term called, there was a saying that power companies in Europe are like widower stocks. So if someone's a widow, they should buy a power company stock because dividend to surely aayega. The same power companies in Germany and other parts of Europe are now making losses because of the huge transition to renewables. The prices for coal-based power have absolutely collapsed. Countries like Germany have decided to shut down their nuclear industry. And over the next 30 years, whether it's the United Kingdom or Germany, they are saying that we are going to completely phase out coal. So, it's a very sudden change. Till 2010, no one thought that the big power companies in Europe would have losses. And now there are active talks of the big power companies being broken up to, one side of their asset coal and other things, and the other side of their assets will be everything else. So, it's very scary. So the incumbents are lot of pressure. The incumbents are oil and companies and large power companies, right? Both of them are under tremendous pressure. And the pressure is on due to two or three things. One is the shift towards renewables. Second is electrification of many things. Vehicles is obviously one of them, but many things can get electrified. And over time are probably accelerating their pace of electrification. And thirdly, choice of consumer, which is a big trend, which is what we call in India CNI. So we say that if a company buys electricity directly, right, through a rooftop solar plant or through a open access and so on, that's a commercial and industrial client, CNI. All over the world, this is a trend which is increasing in pace, because what governments are doing is they're saying, look, we are deregulating the market. Just like in anything else, the consumer has a choice ki wo kisse kharidega. And creating competition is better for the economy in general. That we also agree. You can buy any car you want, and everyone has to compete for your business, right? That benefits consumers, and may the best company win.
So
similarly, governments are saying that the same thing applies to power purchase. Right? All over the world, this is happening. So even in Europe, all the large power companies, whether it is NL or NG and so on, have lost around 25 to 30% of their consumers who have shifted to buying green power directly.
So, Kuldeep sir, you have beautifully or extremely interestingly, you have described the big transition which is happening in the energy markets, and the reason why this sector looks so vibrant. The times when you started CleanMax and this concept of private PPAs and targeting the CNI entities, be it through rooftops or be it through open access plans or third party sale or group captive models. But sir, first fundamental thing that I would like to talk to you or ask you about is that fundamentally solar is more of a distributed energy generation nature. And what's happening in this nation is that we are pumping more and more of utility scale solar into the grid, which is causing a lot of grid failures, grid disturbances, or a lot of grid curtailments, and a lot of issues that likewise on that side is seen. Even despite of this, we are seeing more and more tenders coming up. On the other side, companies and entrepreneurs like you who have successfully established a business model of rooftops and open access, etc., who are actually understanding and deploying the technology in a way which is more suitable to its nature, more distributed. So why is this imbalance created between utility and rooftops and distributed in India, sir? What's your view on this aspect?
I always feel something like energy, every model and every technology has a role to play. There cannot be a scenario where only renewables will win, or only coal will win, or only nuclear will win, or it's not a this either or framing is a incorrect framing of the question. The reality is आपको दोनों चाहिए. आपको घर घर सोलर भी चाहिए, आपको large utilities scale solar farms bhi chahiye, right? You need both. It is not a either or kind of approach. Secondly, one cannot be fully directive, as in that whole central planning model anyway we know fails. So someone sitting in New Delhi will decide how much rooftop will happen, how much ground mount will happen, this, that. It's fine to issue targets to motivate people about the scale of the ambition, right? Like we want to do 20 gigawatt or 40 gigawatt rooftop. That's good because it's inspiring. But beyond a point, what governments need to do is set the broad frameworks which enable an industry to grow. And then the industry will grow at the pace at which it does. So I always suggest to central and state governments that rather than getting caught up with what the target for rooftop capacity should be, I think we should really be mindful of what are our targets for ease of doing business with respect to the solar sector. So for instance, the correct net metering policy to be implemented in all states. Now the reality is, if you look at things today, Tamil Nadu does not yet have a net metering policy. Gujarat does not allow net metering for PPA customers. Karnataka was earlier allowing, 4 or 5 months ago, has stopped giving net metering. Right? So 3 major states are almost gone. Right? So I think we should focus on what are the enablers. And if we focus on the enablers, then the industry will grow on its own feet and, will over time do wonders. But what happens is that there is a lot of policy flip-flop. So for instance, even in states which have net metering, you can't have a plant above 1 megawatt capacity. Right? So there is always a law of 80-20. 20% of the installations will be 80% of the capacity. So my favorite example is Tata Motors in Pune. It's a huge manufacturing setup. It can accommodate 40 megawatt of rooftop. Right? The connected load with the grid and the grid capacity is 100 megawatt. Right? So there's no problem of grid infrastructure and so on. But by law, they can do 1 megawatt rooftop. So अगर आप जो बड़े-बड़े customers हैं उनको artificially clip कर दोगे. So China में there are individual sites who are 50 to 60 megawatt rooftop. Dubai में there are sites which are 10 to 12 megawatt one roof. It's not कि India में ऐसे बड़े locations नहीं है. That's what I'm trying to say. We are not a small country. We also have many very large manufacturing plants. But we want solar rooftop as long as it isn't more than 1 megawatt per site.
So I think that's again a very, very valuable insight. Sir, so I would, in the midst of this discussion, I would like to congratulate on successfully establishing a business model such as CleanMax for CNI entities and then becoming the largest player in this sector. So you've very well described what are the policy or the regulatory issues in achieving this and upscaling this kind of business model. You are interacting with a lot of CNI entities, a lot of corporates. So what is their view? We keep on hearing about many corporates going for RE100. Though rooftops, we have this cap of 1 megawatt, but then definitely there are policies such as group captive models and open access models which can be looked at. So how do we plan, or how do you see this sector of distributed solar growing? I have lots to ask you on this side, sir. Uh, like right now, business models such as CleanMax. Yeah, over to you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, Anand. I would just say I spend half my time just meeting clients. So I don't think of myself as someone in the solar industry necessarily. I think of myself someone who is a sustainability partner to the corporate sector, right? So we do energy efficiency, we do wind, we do rooftop solar, we do grid connected solar. You know, we have operations in Dubai and Thailand. So, you know, whatever our clients need, we will do. There are a few insights I have seen from clients. Point number one is that individuals and corporates are actually far more progressive than governments in their adoption of green. Right? So governments today, when we think about our statement of ambition, it is our renewable purchase obligation, right? Which maybe say 10%, 12%. We want it to grow as high as 20%. Right? That's sort of India's renewable ambition. Most clients, most corporate clients we talk to think about 100%. Some of them may have signed up formally to something like a RE100. Most may not have signed RE100, but are still targeting that. So for instance, the Godrej Group was telling us that they are now at 44% renewable sourcing. That's huge. They're not a RE100 kind of, they're not RE100 signatory, but that's how they think. You know, all technology companies today are very focused on this. You all may remember that, a few months ago, Greta Thunberg had gone to America. And but thoda bahut controversy bhi hua tha because Donald Trump was taking on a 15-year-old schoolgirl and so on. So she came up with this interesting concept called, Protest Fridays, saying that, people should protest on a Friday for action against climate change. So this was taken up by employees at the top technology companies as well, like Amazon, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, and so on. So they also listed 2 days. I think it was 16th September and 23rd September last year. कि उनके कैंपस में प्रोटेस्ट होगा, right? And उस दिन के पहले, प्रोटेस्ट के पहले, those 5 technology companies alone signed 2,000 megawatt of renewable PPAs as a demonstration of their commitment to green. Right? So the pace at which corporates want to move and individuals want to move is much, much faster than the pace at which the government wants to move. Which is very encouraging, because if you see a country like ours, and many democracies, governments are followers. Governments are followers in the sense that a politician or a bureaucrat has to assess कि भाई जनता को क्या चाहिए, and फिर मुझे उसकी जरूरत को पूरी करनी है. right? Governments will not tell people to have futuristic ambitions, but if people already have those ambitions, then they have to help meet them. So to that extent, I believe that corporates are really driving this change very, very fast, and are now massively required by both their employees and their customers to think hard about green. There is no company which is customer facing, जिसका B2C धंधा हो, जो अपने ब्रांड के बारे में केयर करता है. There's no such company who is not thinking about green today.
So there's always this debate when we talk about adding more and more rooftops. As you've said, that 3 states are gone, and I think there is more to that list. I heard UP and Rajasthan also doesn't allow net metering for entities. From Discom's point of view, when we hear, they say that this kind of business model is taking away their best paying customers, and this sector is already stressed. So I think, so you as an industry leader, I'm sure you would have worked upon such a business model or a proposition for the government and the Discoms, wherein they can partner, in this beautiful journey, and they also get their fair share. And they also create a more enabling policy environment for more and more rooftops to happen, remove this cap of 1 megawatt, be more relaxative towards the open access, group captive, or the third party PPM models. So what, as an industry leader, or have you thought about, to grow this sector more, which is currently facing these issues?
I feel, see, there are some very big issues with Discoms. You all know that, right? And I'm not the right person to restate what we all know are the Discom issues. And the fundamental challenges of Discoms are basically now impeding the growth of India. So it is a really, really important issue to solve for, right? And it goes much more than just payment delays to generators. It's not about that. That's what renewable energy companies keep talking about, because yes, our payment is stuck, so of course we will talk about it. But Discoms are impeding the country's growth today. That is the reality, due to the high inefficiency, due to the poor quality of service, whether to a farmer or to a household or to a industry, right? We deal with so many clients. The biggest issues clients sometimes face with expansion is, oh, how do I get my contract capacity enhanced with the power distribution company, right? What that really means is, I'm amazed, because at one level it's like no client of ours, right, thinks ki, "Arey yaar, how do I get CleanMax to put a more capacity for me?" Right? वो एक text message भेजेगा, हम लोग आ जाएंगे, सर धंधा है, चलो आ गए हम लोग. Right? Whereas with the power distribution company, exact opposite. Right? So there are many issues which are the ills, and they have my full sympathy at one level, because the government is also misusing them in many ways. They are a extended part of the state apparatus, so they have to do the state's bidding. So therefore there are many challenges they also face. But yes, we do need to structurally and fundamentally try to solve this problem. Just like in 2004 and 5, Delhi power distribution was privatized, at least in a few important cities in India, or some states, we have to begin privatization. Right? The government cannot say it openly, so they say things like, we will privatize power distribution in union territories, whereas in reality, this is the only way forward. They have to privatize. And unlike other sectors like, say, airlines or banking, where a gradual privatization happened, because private banks, private airlines were allowed, and over time, the private guys just did so much better than the public guys, that now, like in banking, 40% of the lending system is private, right? But in electricity, because of the issues of natural monopoly, you have to privatize it. ये gradual privatization से नहीं होगा. इसमें करना ही पड़ेगा. So, anyway, that is the big issue with the discoms. But I don't think fundamentally power distribution companies are very customer friendly organizations. So when we talk about, us partnering with the power distribution company, right? हमारा DNA एकदम अलग है. So I'm not sure कि क्या हो पाएगा.
So, before we talk more about the current issues such as the big debate about BCD, ALMM, etc., one key question I would, love to hear from you about establishing such a big organization such as CleanMax and establishing an altogether new business model in some terms of private PPAs. In a country like India, where sanctity of contracts and all these issues are very, very prevalent. How did you kind of create this business model, make it convincing enough for the corporates to adopt, make it convincing enough for equity investors and debt investors? What challenges did you face? How did you overcome? And how is the landscape right now in this kind of model? Because we want to see this market grow more and more to its fullest capacity.
Well, when I founded CleanMax, which was January 2011, we didn't even, solar wasn't even cost competitive in January 2011. So I did not start CleanMax as a solar company, right? Our simple mission statement was that we are sustainability partners to private users. So the business opportunity I saw was that, number one, that there are many companies, right, who want to go green, but need a partner in their attempt to do so, because either they will not be able to put up as much capex as is needed to make their facilities green, or even if they can invest money, they need a partner who will really do everything else, and they can get peace of mind and green energy. This is a must have. So I felt that there is a big wave of companies going green, which is a wave which will last 20-30 years. So I thought I should tap that wave. I in fact started with gas-fired cogeneration power plants. Okay. Right? I did not even start in renewables, because in January 2011 solar was whatever 12 rupees 15 rupees per unit of power, and koi corporate 15 rupees ki bijli to nahi kharidta hai. So there was no market. So I started with gas-fired cogeneration. That didn't work out too well. By 2012, solar prices had come down. So then I shifted from gas to solar, and we started doing rooftop solar. But I always wanted to focus on that sustainability partnership. Also because I felt that in life, no matter what strategy you pursue, it has to link to what advantages you bring as an entrepreneur or a manager, right? So these very, very large state government, that time it was more state government, now it has become more central maybe, state government PPAs with state chief ministers, large land acquisition, huge financing. I did not see what advantage I would bring with my background of having been a consultant and so on. How would I compete with all the billionaires who want to compete in the renewable energy industry, right? So I felt that this is a better strategy for me, right? And it will be a winning strategy because lastly, I also feel in a country like ours, I feel that at least with the top corporates, your money is much safer than with power distribution companies.
So, totally appreciate this view, sir. So, what is the current capacity or the projects that CleanMax currently has? What is the pipeline looking at, or what is the aim and vision you have for CleanMax and for this industry, particularly rooftops for C&I entities, sir?
So we have, as of say June 2020, as of now, we have around 600 odd megawatt of commissioned capacity. We are adding capacity at a pace between I would say between 200 and 300 megawatt a year, right? That's the sort of pace at which we are adding plants. And, so does that adequately answer, Anand?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So moving to this current hot topic about creating tariff barriers and this mega debate about manufacturing in India, and as Indians, we have also spoken many times. We love to see more and more manufacturing ecosystem getting pace over there. Government has taken initiative in terms of SGD. We all know SGD was not taken in a very or did not positively impact the developers. They are struggling with getting the SGD back, the pass-through clause. The manufacturers in India were not usually benefited. We saw a lot of other countries getting benefit of it. Then again, we have this BCD coming up and this concept of grandfathering. And again, we see manufacturers here saying that it is not going to benefit us that much because of grandfathering comes. So still, utility scale projects would not be impacted that much in the short run. But my particular worry is again, it will probably hamper the rooftop space because it is already quite cost competitive and we're competing with discoms and all these issues of policy and regulatory uncertainty. So this is like the broad question in front of you. So first, if you could start talking about your views about manufacturing in India versus these tariff barriers, non-tariff barriers, what is going to happen, what we should do, etc., and the impact on the rooftop solar industry or the open access industry per se.
See, firstly, there's no doubt in my mind that India needs a lot more manufacturing jobs. Right? We need to create around 11 million jobs per annum. We are doing much, much lesser than that. तो मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में नौकरियां तो चाहिए. केवल आईटी से या केवल सर्विसेज सेगमेंट से the whole country cannot rise. So we need manufacturing jobs. There is no doubt about that. However, in any area, I think if we start with the problem that Make in India has to succeed because we need manufacturing jobs, we as a nation, I feel, have to be a bit smart कि कहाँ पे हम लोग जीतेंगे और कहाँ पे maybe नहीं जीत पाएंगे. That कोई भी strategy आप company के लिए बनाते हो तो यही सोचते हो कि where will I win, where I may not win, or where it's not worthwhile putting too much effort to win, right? And I've seen that whether it's semiconductor manufacturing or solar panel manufacturing, these are two segments which have very high single site integration of facilities, because you go from, you have to first make wafers, cells, panels, right? So these require very high integration around a site, at least from the ingot to wafer stage. You need a very high integration, and till the cell stage you need a high integration. Cell to module actually thoda bahut idhar udhar kar sakte hain. But the reality is in semiconductors and some of these, it is not clear to me if we will be able to win. Right? I don't know, I'm no expert, but it definitely is a reality that these kind of industries are extremely capital and energy intensive. They are co-located and integrated at one site, and even winning in them will not create tremendous amount of jobs, right? So that is the reality. It is not that millions of jobs will get created or lakhs of jobs will get created in solar manufacturing. The point is, no. Every job is valuable, I agree, but that is the reality. Now, the second thing is on tariff. See, in the last 2 years, we've had safeguard, right? But I've not seen much increase in domestic manufacturing capacity in spite of tariff protection being between 15 to 25%. तो ये तो fact है, we all know कि कितना manufacturing industry का growth हुआ है, नहीं हुआ है. And if we now feel that all consumers in India, whether they are bijli consumers of the DISCOM or they are private consumers who may be contracting with me or my competitors, all of them should pay a price to allow for the growth of solar manufacturing in India. That's fine. Maybe we will pay it, and maybe this will hopefully now see such capacity come up. However, for any industry to come up, any entrepreneur or business house looks at returns, right? पैसा बनेगा तो लोग धंधा करेंगे, नहीं बन रहा है तो क्यों धंधा करेंगे? That's the mentality at which capital is allocated. Now the reality is, if you look at the world's top 5 solar manufacturing companies, right, their return on equity, right, return on capital deployment is not more than 10%. Right, and these are the world's top 5. These are people with 5 to 10 gigawatt capacity, great brand name, 7 to 10 year track record, technology leadership, all of that. Equally, yes, sir. Yes, Soma, this is the number 4 Chinese manufacturers. All the leaders in solar manufacturing in the world are largely Chinese now. So equally, there are equal number of companies who have died in the attempt to get there, right? Companies who've gone bankrupt, etc. So the reality is, if after investing billions of dollars, your return is going to be 5 to 10% in a industry with very frequent technology change, right? And therefore possibility of mortality. It's not clear to me which Indian business houses really want to invest in this. I agree the government wants this, right? That we should have modules made in India, right? And as an Indian, I also feel like that. Yeah, of course, we should have modules made in India. But the fact is, if the returns are quite low in this industry, after billions of dollars of investment and risk and technology and so on, then who's dying to make such an investment?
So I think the way you have really pinpointedly described the real issue, I think it's extremely interesting for all of us to know. It was extremely fun, a lot of fun for me to interact with you. Just few last things, because since a bulk of your capacity is in the kind of ground-mounted space, selling power through various business models like third-party sale or group captives or open access, etc. So if you have some insights to share on this policy and regulatory regime, where is it headed towards, and what is the current landscape looks like in this policy regime, sir?
So I find that in most states, we are able to save clients between 20 to 30% on their energy cost, right? And that's therefore a very compelling proposition, right? So,
Thank you very much. Just as some closing comment, if you feel any issue that needs to be talked about, being as a leader or for the solar industry, any closing comments you have, if you have. I have really thoroughly enjoyed speaking with you, and really my knowledge level is much above on various issues. As you have enlightened us. So any closing remarks you have for everyone?
I would just say that, many times it feels that this is a difficult industry to work in, right? We all feel that. I feel that often. I'm sure all of us feel sometimes, with all the challenges that sometimes we feel. But I would just remind everyone of what I opened with, which is renewables is to this century what oil was to the last. So, I think we are doing the right thing and the noble thing. And we should remember that, and in low moments use that to cheer us up.
Thank you very much, sir. I think it was extremely interesting and joyful to talk to you, and I really enjoyed. I wish you very good luck and all the positive wishes for my side, for CleanMax and yourself, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.